The rain-slick streets of San Francisco's Chinatown gleamed under the sodium glow of street lamps, where the scent of sizzling woks and steaming dim sum mingled with the salty tang of fog rolling in from the bay. Inside Lotus Garden, a dimly lit restaurant tucked between herbal shops and jade emporiums, the evening rush had peaked and ebbed like the tides. Waitress Mia Chen moved through the haze of cigarette smoke and clinking porcelain with practiced grace, her black apron tied tight over a simple silk blouse. At 28, she was a fixture here, reliable, unassuming, with dark hair pulled into a neat bun that hid the faint scar tracing her left jawline, a remnant from a childhood accident she never spoke of. The place was a neutral ground for the city's undercurrents, where deals were whispered over plates of Peking duck and Tsingtao bottles. Tonight, the back booth was occupied by a group that turned heads without trying. An elderly Korean woman in a tailored hanbok, her silver hair coiled like a crown, flanked by two stone-faced men in crisp suits. Across from her sat Victor Kang, the man whose name evoked both fear and fortune in the shadows of the Bay Area. At 45, Kang ran a network of import-export firms that masked something far sharper: rumors of docks controlled, shipments rerouted, and rivals who vanished into the Pacific. His face was all angles, eyes like polished obsidian, but tonight there was a tension in his posture, a subtle tap of fingers on the lacquered table. Mia approached with a tray of jasmine tea and ginger-infused dumplings, her steps silent on the worn bamboo mats. The air hummed with the low murmur of conversations, punctuated by the sizzle from the open kitchen and the distant wail of a foghorn. She set the tray down, offering a polite nod. "Compliments of the house, Mr. Kang. Anything else?" The old woman, Mrs. Haijin Park, as the reservation book noted, looked up sharply, her eyes narrowing behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was a ghost from Kang's past, a matriarch whose family had woven through the criminal tapestries of Seoul and now San Francisco. Without a word, she reached out, her gnarled hand shooting forward like a striking cobra. Mia froze as fingers clamped onto her chin, tilting her face into the lantern light. The scar caught the glow, a thin, silvery line, jagged at one end, as if clawed by something feral. This scar. Mrs. Park's voice was a rasp, thick with the accent of old Korea, cutting through the din like a knife. She traced it with a thumbnail, her grip unyielding. "It runs in our bloodline." Mia's heart stuttered, pulse thundering in her ears. The restaurant's warmth turned cloying, the steam from the kitchen now a stifling veil. She tried to pull back, but the woman's hold was iron. "Ma'am, please." Victor's chopsticks clattered to the plate. He sat frozen, color draining from his face, the shake in his hands betraying the composure that had built an empire. His security detail shifted in their seats, hands inching toward concealed holsters, but a sharp glance from him stilled them. The booth felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken histories, debts from decades ago when Kang's father had fled Busan after a botched smuggling run, leaving alliances fractured and blood oaths unfulfilled. Mrs. Park released Mia with a shove, her eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and sorrow. "You see it, don't you, Victor? The mark of the Parks? My sister's child, lost in the fire at Incheon docks, or so we thought. But here she stands, serving tea like some stranger." She leaned back, folding her hands. "The blood calls to blood. Explain this, boy, before I drag every secret from your ledgers." Mia's mind reeled, fragments of memory surfacing like debris in a storm. Her mother, a vague figure from foster care files, had been Korean, vanished after a warehouse blaze in her youth. No father listed, no ties beyond a faded photo of a woman with the same jawline. She'd dismissed it as coincidence, buried it under shifts and survival. But now, under the watchful eyes of strangers, it felt like a noose tightening. She backed away, tray clutched like a shield, the scar burning as if fresh. Victor cleared his throat, voice low and edged with gravel. "Mrs. Park, this is unexpected. Mia, wait." He stood halfway, suit jacket straining, but she was already retreating toward the kitchen, the swing door flapping behind her like a heartbeat. In the narrow corridor lined with spice sacks and humming refrigerators, Mia pressed against the cool tile wall, breath coming in shallow bursts. The scar, it had always been a nuisance, a story she spun for nosy dates about a kitchen mishap. But bloodline, that word unlocked something primal, a whisper of inheritance she hadn't earned or wanted. Outside, through the service window, she glimpsed Victor murmuring to his men, phones already out, pulling strings in the digital web that tracked plates and calls across the city. The old woman's revelation hung like smoke, curling into every corner. Was this a trap? A ploy to leverage Kang's vulnerabilities? Or worse, truth, pulling her into a world of guarded mansions and shadowed docks where family wasn't chosen but claimed? Mia's hands trembled as she untied her apron, the fabric whispering against her skin. She needed air, answers, but the rain outside pounded harder, blurring the neon signs into warnings. As Victor's gaze flicked toward the kitchen door, a subtle nod to his driver outside signaled the convoy to ready. Black SUVs idling with tinted windows, engines purring like predators. The night was young, and the threads of fate, once tangled, were unraveling fast. But who held the scissors? The rain hammered the alley behind Lotus Garden like a relentless drumbeat, turning the narrow passage into a slick ribbon of blacktop that reflected the erratic flicker of a faulty neon sign. Mia pushed through the back door, the cool night air slapping her face, carrying the briny bite of the bay mixed with the greasy exhaust from idling delivery vans. Her apron dangled from one hand, forgotten, as she leaned against the damp brick wall, trying to steady her breathing. The scar on her jaw throbbed, not from pain, but from the weight of eyes that had suddenly made it mean something more than a faded mark. Inside, the kitchen clatter faded to a muffled roar, but voices carried through the service window like echoes in a tunnel. Victor Kang's low timbre, cut sharpest, laced with that controlled urgency she'd heard in whispers from the other waitstaff, stories of favors called in at dawn, shipments vanishing without a trace. "Track the plates on that silver Lexus out front," he was saying to one of his men, the words clipped and precise. "And pull the reservation logs for the last 6 months. If Mrs. Park's been watching, I want to know how close." Mia's stomach twisted. Watching? For her. The old woman's grip lingered in her mind, those fingers like roots digging into soil, long left fallow. Bloodline. It was absurd, a fever dream spun from too many late shifts and half-remembered foster files. Her mother had been a ghost, Korean immigrant, warehouse worker, presumed dead in that Incheon fire 30 years back. No siblings, no claims, just Mia, scraping by on tips and the quiet rhythm of Chinatown's underbelly. But Victor's reaction, the shake in his hands, the way his eyes had locked on her scar like it was a ledger entry gone wrong, suggested otherwise. The door creaked open behind her, spilling warm light and the scent of sesame oil into the alley. Victor stepped out, coat collar turned up against the drizzle, his silhouette cutting through the steam from a nearby manhole. He moved with the deliberate grace of someone who owned every shadow. But tonight there was a hesitation in his stride, a crack in the armor. "Mia," he said, voice soft but carrying over the rain, "we need to talk, not here." She straightened, wiping rain from her face, her pulse a wild staccato. Part of her wanted to bolt, down the alley, into the labyrinth of herb shops and noodle stands where she could vanish like so many others. But curiosity clawed at her, mingled with a prickling fear that the woman's words had stirred something real. And safety? The streets felt alive now, watchful. Talk about what? Some family fairy tale? I'm nobody to you people. Victor's eyes, dark and unreadable under the brim of his hat, flicked to the end of the alley where a black SUV idled, its headlights slicing through the downpour like searchbeams. No plates visible, just the low hum of an engine tuned for silence. "You're more than that now. Mrs. Park isn't one for games. If she's claiming you, it's because she sees a debt or a leverage. My family's tangled with hers since before you were born. Bad blood from the docks in Busan. I can't let you walk away blind." He extended a hand, not grabbing, but offering, an anchor in the storm. Mia hesitated, the rain soaking through her blouse, chilling her skin. Gratitude? No. Moral duty? Closer. That nagging sense that ignoring this might unravel everything she'd built. But financial need whispered too. The restaurant paid the bills, but whispers of Victor's generosity could mean protection from the rent hikes creeping through the neighborhood. Or worse, entanglement. Still, the alley felt exposed, the distant splash of tires on puddles hinting at shadows that might already be circling. "Fine," she said finally, voice barely above the rain, "but not here, and not for long." The SUV's door opened with a soft click, revealing leather seats that smelled of polish and faint cigar smoke. Victor's driver, a broad-shouldered man with an earpiece coiled like a snake, nodded without a word, eyes scanning the mirrors for tails. As Mia slid in, the door sealed shut with a hydraulic whisper, cocooning them in warmth. The vehicle pulled away smoothly, weaving through Chinatown's arteries toward the Embarcadero, where the bay's fog thickened like a shroud. Inside, the tension hummed like the security radio crackling faintly from the dash. Victor sat across from her, knees almost touching, his fingers steepled as if weighing confessions. "That scar," he began, glancing at it sidelong. "Mrs. Park's family mark goes back generations, survivors of a clan feud in the 70s. Her sister, your possible aunt, got it in a warehouse collapse during a raid. Fire, structural failure. Officials called it an accident, but we know better. Smugglers cutting corners on shipments. If you're hers, it explains why she's surfaced now. Rivals are sniffing around my operations again. Old grudges." Mia's mind raced, piecing fragments. The Foster files had mentioned a fire, vague details about an immigrant worker. No names, just redacted lines. "And you? What's your stake? You looked like you'd seen a ghost." He leaned back, the leather creaking. "My father owed the Parks a vow, protection for their blood after that night. He broke it when he fled to the States, leaving loose ends. I've been paying it down in shadows, safe passages, diverted manifests, but if you're the missing piece." His voice trailed, eyes narrowing at a flicker in the driver's mirror. "We're being followed. Silver sedan, 2 cars back. Not one of mine." The SUV accelerated, tires hissing on wet pavement as they merged onto the winding roads toward the Presidio's edge, Victor's safe house territory. A cluster of converted warehouses overlooking the Golden Gate. Mia's heart pounded, the city's lights blurring into streaks. Through the tinted glass, she caught a glimpse of the sedan weaving closer, its wipers slashing like accusations. Was this the old woman's doing, a test, or something from Victor's rivals, scenting vulnerability? As they turned into a gated drive, floodlights snapping on to bathe the compound in harsh white, Victor's phone buzzed, a burner, screen lighting his face in blue. He read the message, jaw tightening. "Compromised tail. Guard rotation at the warehouse was off by 10 minutes tonight. Someone tipped them." The gate clanged shut behind them, but Mia's unease lingered, the rain's patter now echoing off steel walls. Who had sold the watch? And what price would they demand next? The warehouse loomed like a forgotten fortress on the edge of the Presidio, its corrugated steel walls etched with rust from years of bay salt and relentless fog. Floodlights carved stark shadows across the gravel drive, where 2 more black SUVs flanked the entrance, their engines ticking cool in the downpour. Mia stepped out into the chill. the rain a fine mist that clung to her skin like doubt, carrying the metallic tang of the nearby strait and the faint, oily hum of generators buried deep in the compound. Victor's hand brushed her elbow, guiding, not gripping, as they hurried toward the reinforced door, his security detail fanning out with the precision of a well-oiled machine, flashlights sweeping the perimeter for unseen eyes. Inside, the air shifted to something warmer, laced with the scent of aged wood and machine oil. The vast space partitioned into living quarters that blurred the line between bunker and luxury. Exposed beams overhead dripped with condensation, and a bank of monitors glowed in the corner, cycling feeds from hidden cameras. The gate, the docks beyond, empty alleys snaking back to the city. Victor's safe house wasn't a mansion of marble and chandeliers. It was functional, a nod to his code, power without ostentation, protection without chains. But tonight, it felt like a cage closing in. "Stay close," Victor murmured, leading her down a corridor lined with locked steel doors, each humming faintly with electronic locks. His burner phone was still clutched in one hand, the screen's glow etching lines on his face. Mia nodded, her wet shoes squeaking on the concrete floor, but her mind churned. Autonomy clashed with the pull of his world. She wasn't some damsel bartered in blood oaths, yet the sedan's pursuit had ignited a fear she couldn't shake. Loyalty to what? A stranger's claim on her veins? Or the man who'd just pulled her from the storm, his own hands trembling earlier at the restaurant? They entered a sparse lounge, leather armchairs around a low table scarred from use, a sideboard stocked with decanters of soju and whiskey. One of Victor's men, a wiry operative named Jax, with a faint accent from Incheon, was already at the monitors, fingers flying over a keyboard. "Boss," the sedan's plates traced to a rental under a ghost name, Lee something or other. No hits on our usual databases, but the route matches a pattern. They've been circling Chinatown for weeks, low profile. And that guard rotation slip? Log shows timestamp tampering. Internal access code used at 8:47 p.m. Not external hack. Someone inside. Victor's jaw tightened. The shake from earlier replaced by a cold fury. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the liquid glugging like a confession, and handed one to Mia. The burn down her throat grounded her, chasing away the alley's chill. "Internal," he repeated, voice low, eyes flicking to Jax. "Run the access logs again. Who had eyes on the rotation schedule?" Jax nodded, pulling up a ledger on screen, discrete entries of guard shifts, coded in shorthand, timestamps, names, patrol radii. Mia leaned in, the blue light washing her face, her scar catching the edge like a secret unveiled. The entries blurred into a rhythm, but one stood out. A double shift for a newbie guard, Raoul, who'd clocked in late twice this month. Behavioral tell, subtle, but there. "That one," she said, pointing without thinking, her waitress instincts kicking in from spotting pilfering cooks. "Raoul. He always lingers by the service door, eyes on his phone, not like the others." Victor paused, glass midway to his lips, surprise flickering before he masked it. "You notice that? Good eye." He tapped the screen, zooming on Raoul's file, a recent hire, background check clean but thin, from a rival crew's old stomping grounds in Oakland. Could be coincidence, or a plant, Mrs. Park's timing, surfacing now with you. It's no accident. If you're Park blood, she might be calling in my father's debt to shield you from what's coming, or using you to settle scores. Mia's grip tightened on the glass, the whiskey's warmth warring with the ice in her veins. Ethics versus survival. She owed nothing to ghosts, yet the scar felt heavier, a tether to a legacy she hadn't chosen. And if it's true, what then? You protect me like some asset in your shipments? Possessiveness laced her words, a push against the autonomy slipping from her grasp. Victor's world demanded loyalty, but hers thrived on independence. Tips earned, shifts chosen, no oaths binding her steps. He set his glass down, leaning closer, the scent of his cologne. sandalwood and rain, cutting through the room's staleness. Not an asset, a vow. My code, never let innocence pay for old sins. My father broke that with the Parks, I won't. His eyes held hers, a rare vulnerability cracking through, memories of a past loss. Perhaps a sibling caught in the dock's crossfire, shaping his restraint. But before she could press, the lights flickered, a low groan echoing from the generators outside. The monitors stuttered, one feed glitching to static over the gate. Jax cursed under his breath. Power surge? No. Deliberate. Someone's jamming the outer cams. We've got movement, shadows by the east fence. Alarms didn't blare. Victor's setup was silent. A whisper network of burners and hand signals. He stood, motioning to Mia. Safe room now. It's a probe, testing our edges. The corridor blurred as they moved. Victor's hand now firm on her arm, guiding her to a hidden panel that slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, the room was a vault, reinforced walls, a cot, emergency kit stocked with bandages and a satellite phone. The door sealed behind them with a thud, plunging them into dim emergency lighting that hummed like a distant threat. Mia's breath came quick, the confined space amplifying every sound, the rain's muffled roar, Victor's steadying inhale. Through a small intercom, Jax's voice crackled. Perimeter breach confirmed. 2 intruders masked, cutting wire. Raoul's transponder just went dark. Betrayal. Victor's face hardened, pulling a concealed pistol from his ankle holster, checking the clip with practiced calm. No graphic rush, just the weight of choices. Call in the convoy, or handle it quiet, preserving the code that kept innocence out of the fire. Mia's heart raced, suspicion warring with the trust budding in his gaze. Was this the real threat? Rivals exploiting the Bloodline claim, or something closer, a turncoat in Victor's ranks, unraveling from within? As distant shouts echoed through the vents, followed by the sharp crack of suppressed shots, she pressed against the wall, wondering if the safe room would hold, or if the shadows outside carried her name. If you're enjoying this story so far, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The safe room's air grew thick and stale, the emergency lights casting a ruddy glow that turned Victor's face into a mask of shadowed resolve. Mia pressed her back against the cool steel wall, the faint vibration of the warehouse's structure humming through her spine like a warning pulse. Outside, the muffled chaos filtered in, sharp bursts of suppressed gunfire, the crunch of boots on gravel, Jax's voice barking orders over the intercom in clipped Korean. No screams, no frenzy. Victor's operation ran on precision, a code that minimized fallout even as the world outside fractured. Victor's pistol rested easy in his hand, barrel pointed low, but his eyes were on the small monitor embedded in the door panel, cycling grainy feeds from internal cams. They won't breach this, he said, voice steady as the rain's relentless patter against the outer walls. Reinforced to withstand a small charge. We've got 10 minutes before the backup convoy rolls in from the docks, ETA based on the last drill. He glanced at her. The vulnerability from moments ago hardening into something protective, possessive. You all right? Mia nodded, though her throat tightened. The whiskey's burn now, a distant memory swallowed by adrenaline. Autonomy screamed at her to demand a way out, to reject this vault that smelled of concrete dust and sealed desperation, but fear rooted her. The scar on her jaw itched under the humid air, a reminder of the Bloodline claim that had ignited this storm. What about Raoul? If he's the leak, how deep does it go? Your logs, did they show anyone else with access? He holstered the weapon with a fluid motion, pulling a tablet from the emergency kit, a rugged device preloaded with encrypted files. The screen flickered to life, illuminating the confined space with lists of names, timestamps, and patrol routes. Raoul's code was used remotely, bounced through a burner proxy, but look here. His finger traced a line, an anomaly in the shipping manifests from 2 weeks back, A container rerouted from Busan to Oakland without his sign-off. Subtle. Looks like routine import, electronics, tea crates, but the weight logs don't match. Someone skimming, using my routes for their own play. Mrs. Park's rivals, maybe the Lee Syndicate out of LA. They've been probing since her sister vanished in that fire. Mia's mind pieced it together, Waitress' sharp observation blending with the puzzle. The old woman's eyes at the restaurant, triumphant, not vengeful, suggested she wasn't the architect of this breach, but a catalyst. So I'm bait. She drops the Bloodline bomb to flush out your weak spots? Independence flared in her chest, a push against the way Victor's gaze lingered, as if she were already woven into his code of vows and debts. Loyalty to a phantom family versus the life she'd carved alone. Tips in her pocket, no shadows trailing her steps. Victor's laugh was low, bitter, cutting through the intercom's static. Bait. Maybe, but not just you. My father's old promise, to shield Park blood. It's a ledger item they've held over me for years. If you're the lost niece, it binds us tighter. I don't break codes, Mia. Not for rivals. Not for ghosts. He stepped closer, the space shrinking, his hand hovering near her arm, not touching, respecting the boundary she clung to. The air between them crackled, a tension born of shared peril, his possessiveness tempered by the ethics that had kept innocence from his crosshairs. A past loss shadowed his words, whispers from the restaurant staff about a brother lost to a dockside ambush, shaping his restraint. The monitor beeped, Jax's face appearing in pixelated bursts. Boss, we've got them pinned. 2 down, but the 3rd circling to the east generator. Raoul's signal pinged from a van 2 blocks out. He's feeding cords. Convoy's 5 minutes, but the storm's jamming comms. Lightning took out the primary relay tower. A crackle, then a thud echoed through the vents, the lights dipping as the outer power strained. Mia's pulse spiked, the room's confines pressing in, the distant roar of the bay wind mingling with the creak of settling beams. "Extraction plan," Victor said into the intercom, voice commanding. "Flank from the west tunnel. Use the old shipping chute. I'll cover from here." He turned to Mia, eyes intense. "When the door opens, you move fast. Trust the path, not the noise." She met his gaze, suspicion warring with the budding trust. His world of guarded warehouses and silent oaths versus her prudent solitude. Ambition had no place here. Survival demanded a leap. The door hissed open on pneumatic struts, spilling cooler air laced with cordite and rain. Jax waited in the corridor, rifle slung low, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill. "Clear to the chute. Go!" They bolted, feet pounding concrete slick with condensation, the warehouse's vast skeleton groaning under the storm's assault. Floodlights outside stuttered, casting erratic shadows that danced like intruders across the walls. Mia's breath came in ragged bursts, the scar a hot line against her skin as they ducked into the west tunnel, a narrow passage once used for discreet cargo, now a vein of escape lined with dripping pipes and the earthy scent of wet soil. Halfway down, a figure lunged from a side alcove. Raoul, face twisted in desperation, a knife glinting in the dim emergency strips. "It's not what you think," he snarled, voice accented with Oakland grit, lunging not at Victor, but at the tablet in his hand. Betrayal raw, human error in a web of greed. Raoul's thin background check hiding a bribe from the Lees, a promise of easy cash for tipping rotations and manifests. Victor sidestepped, pistol whipping the air in a controlled arc that sent Raoul sprawling against the pipework with a metallic clang. No kill shot, the code held, even here. Jax zip-tied him swift, the scuffle ending in grunts and the zip of restraints. "Talk," Victor demanded, kneeling, the tunnel's echo amplifying his gravel tone. "Who paid you? The Parks or the syndicates?" Raoul spat blood-tinged saliva, eyes darting. "Lee's crew. Said the old woman's stirring old debts, wanted the girl as leverage to force your hand on the Busan routes, the scar." They knew about it weeks ago from some archive photo in the Foster files. Hacked or bought doesn't matter. Mia's blood ran cold, the revelation slicing deeper than the knife's threat. Her files, hacked, exposed, turning a private scar into a beacon. The tunnel felt hazardous now, the storm's rumble shaking loose rivulets of water from the ceiling, pooling at their feet. Victor hauled Raoul up, shoving him toward Jax. "Lock him in the holding cell. We'll extract the rest later." As they emerged into the night, the convoy's headlights pierced the fog, 3 SUVs barreling up the drive, tires churning gravel. Victor guided Mia into the lead vehicle, the door slamming shut like a vow sealed. But as they peeled away, a burner buzzed in his pocket, an intercepted message from Mrs. Park's line, coordinates to a neutral meet at the docks tomorrow. Invitation or trap? And with Raoul's confession hanging, was the bloodline a shield, or the blade poised at their throats? The convoy sliced through the storm-lashed streets of the Presidio, wipers slashing rhythmically against the onslaught, the bay's fog coiling like smoke around the SUV's flanks. Inside the lead vehicle, Mia huddled against the leather seat, the heater's warm blast doing little to dispel the chill seeping from her bones. The scent of wet wool and gun oil hung heavy, mingling with the faint, acrid tang of cordite from the tunnel scuffle. Victor sat beside her, burner phone still in hand, his thumb hovering over the screen as if debating whether to crush it. Jax rode shotgun, murmuring into his earpiece, coordinating with the trailing units, eyes on mirrors, scanning for any silver sedan that might have survived the night's purge. Mia's mind raced, replaying Raoul's desperate snarl in the tunnel's dim confines. Hacked Foster files, the scar, a private mark turned public liability, broadcast through digital shadows and bought loyalties. Autonomy felt like a fraying thread. She'd built her life on untraceable steps, blending into Chinatown's crowds, but now every glance in a rear view could be a threat. Victor's code loomed larger too, his restraint in the tunnel, pistol whipping instead of firing, a vow etched from past losses that echoed in his clipped commands. Loyalty versus suspicion. Was he shielding her out of debt to the Parks or something more possessive, a claim on the bloodline that bound them? "Message from Mrs. Park," Victor said finally, voice low over the engine's hum. He angled the screen away from Jax, the glow illuminating the scar on his own knuckle, a faint line from a long-ago dockside brawl. "Dawn meet at Pier 39's underbelly, neutral ground, tourist crowds for cover. But the docks below are a maze of shipping manifests and guard rotations. She wants to clarify the blood debt. No demands, just coordinates." Mia leaned in, the leather creaking under her shift, peering at the text, simple, coded in Hanja characters that her fragmented Korean picked up. Family, vow, witness. "Trap," she said flatly, the word tasting like rain-soaked asphalt. "Raoul said the Lees knew about me weeks ago. If she's signaling them, this is how they reel us in. Your ledgers, cross-check her movements against the rerouted containers." Victor's eyes met hers, a flicker of respect cutting through the tension. He nodded to Jax, who pulled a rugged laptop from the dash compartment, the keys clicking like distant Morse under the storm's rumble. Screens bloomed with data, discrete ledgers of imports, timestamps syncing with burner pings from Mrs. Park's known associates. "Here," Jack said, highlighting a cluster. Her silver Lexus plates pinged near the Oakland yards 3 nights running, same time as that weight discrepancy on the Busan crate. Not direct, but behavioral tell. She's been scouting, not striking. If it's the Lees pulling strings, she's the distraction. The convoy banked toward a secondary safe house, a nondescript loft above a shuttered fish market on Fisherman's Wharf, its windows blacked out with one-way film. As they pulled into the underground garage, sodium lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows on oil-stained concrete. Victor's team swept the space first. Thermal scans for hidden heat signatures, doors checked for tampering. Clear. Inside, the loft unfolded like a tactical nerve center, maps pinned to walls marked with red pins for rival territories. A kitchenette humming with the drip of a coffee maker, the air thick with the salty brine from the wharf below. Mia paced the worn hardwood, the floorboards groaning softly, her wet shoes leaving faint trails. Prudence warred with curiosity. Declining the meat meant hiding, but engaging pulled her deeper into Victor's orbit, where ethics bent under the weight of survival. "Why go?" she asked, stopping at a window overlooking the pier's Ferris wheel, its lights blurred by rain. "You owe her family a vow, fine. But me, I'm not signing up for your shadows." He poured coffee into mismatched mugs, steam rising like fog from the bay, handing her one black and strong. The warmth seeped through ceramic, grounding her, because ignoring it invites worse. The Lees aren't patient, they hit hard, like the fire that took her sister. My code demands I face debts head-on. Breaking it cost my brother his life in a setup like this. His voice dipped, the past loss a raw edge, shaping the restraint that kept his empire from spilling innocent blood. Possessiveness flickered in his stance, close but not crowding, a pull she felt despite herself. Trust tested by the night's betrayals. Before she could respond, Jax's laptop chimed. An intercepted call log from a compromised line, Raoul's voice patched through in grainy audio. "The girl's the key," he rasped to an unseen handler. "Park mark confirmed. Boss'll fold for her. Reroute the manifest tonight or the warehouse goes up like Inchin." A pause, then coordinates. The very pier Mrs. Park had named. Human error. Greed-fueled, Raoul's thin loyalty cracking under syndicate pressure. Victor's face darkened, the mug slamming down with a crack. Staged. She's drawing us out, but the Lees are the blade. We go, but on our terms. Flank the meat with a decoy convoy, jam their burners with the warehouse rig. He pulled a satellite phone from a wall safe, dialing a number that rang through to a contact at the Port Authority. Subtle leverage, a favor for eyes on shipping cams. Mia set her mug aside, the coffee's bitterness mirroring her resolve. Bonds tested. Suspicion of Mrs. Park's motives clashed with the found alliance forming here, in this loft's stark light. "I'm coming," she said, voice steady. "If it's my bloodline, I end this on my feet, not hiding." Dawn crept in grey and reluctant, the storm easing to a drizzle that pattered against the loft's roof like impatient fingers. They moved out in phases. Victor's decoy SUV peeling off toward the tourist traps, drawing any tails, while the real team slipped through service tunnels beneath the wharf, dank passages reeking of fish guts and diesel, lit by flickering halogens that buzzed like trapped flies. Mia's pulse thrummed with the drip of condensation, the tunnel's confines amplifying every whisper. Guard rotations relayed via earpieces, access codes punched into a rusted grate for the dockside exit. Emerging onto the pier's underbelly, the bay stretched vast and indifferent, waves slapping against pilings with a hollow thud. Crates loomed like sentinels, manifests fluttering in the breeze. Coded entries for tea and silks, masking whatever shadows the Lees coveted. Mrs. Park waited alone on a weathered bench, hanbok sodden but posture unbowed, her silver hair a stark contrast to the sodium lamp's yellow haze. No entourage, just the distant cry of gulls and the hum of security radios from hidden vantage points. "Victor," she called, voice carrying over the water like a summons, and the girl, blood recognizes blood. Her eyes locked on Mia's scar, a mix of sorrow and steel. But as Victor stepped forward, a low rumble echoed from the shadows, a boat motor cutting through the fog, its silhouette bulked with figures in dark gear. Jax's voice crackled in Victor's ear. "Inbound, Lees' crew, 3 on deck, armed. Our jammers holding their comms. But the manifest crates are rigged, smoke diversion incoming." Tension spiked, the environment turning hazardous. A sudden blackout from tampered lines plunged the pier into twilight. the drizzle masking footsteps as rivals closed in. Mia's hand brushed Victor's instinctively, autonomy yielding to the moment's demand. Was Mrs. Park the ally or the architect? Her invitation, the lure that would cost them the docks or their lives. The blackout swallowed the pier in an instant, the sodium lamps dying with a final sputter, leaving only the bay's restless slap against the pilings and the low growl of the approaching boat motor to pierce the void. Mia's hand tightened on Victor's sleeve, the coarse wool damp from the drizzle, her breath fogging in the sudden chill that rolled off the water like a living thing. The air thickened with the briny reek of seaweed and diesel exhaust. The fog coiling thicker now, turning the crates into hulking silhouettes that could hide a dozen threats. Mrs. Park remained seated on the bench, a pale ghost in her sodden hanbok. But her posture shifted, rigid, expectant, as if the darkness were an old ally. "Stay low," Victor whispered, his voice a gravel thread cutting through the tension, pulling her behind a stack of weathered manifests tied with frayed ropes. The papers rustled in the breeze, their ink-smeared entries, tea shipments, silk bolts, innocuous covers for whatever shadows the Lees chased, flapping like warnings. Jax and two others melted into the gloom, shadows among shadows, their suppressed rifles trained on the water's edge. Victor's burner vibrated silently against his thigh, a relayed ping from the jammer rig back at the loft. Lee's comm scrambled, but the boat was closing fast, hull cutting the waves with predatory precision. Mia's heart hammered, the scar on her jaw a phantom itch under the humid dark. Autonomy clashed with the instinct to cling. This wasn't her fight, yet the bloodline claim had dragged her here, into Victor's web of codes and debts. His possessiveness simmered beneath the calm, a hand hovering near her waist, protective without caging, shaped by the losses that haunted his ledgers. A brother, gone to a rival's blade, innocent spared only because he enforced restraint where others wouldn't. Why trust her? Mia hissed, eyes straining for movement in the fog. Raoul's tape. She could be feeding them everything. Victor's profile sharpened in the faint glow from the distant wharf lights, his breath steady despite the stakes. Because blood debts aren't forged in betrayal. If she's Park, she honors the vow my father shattered, but if not... He trailed off as the boat's engine cut, the vessel bumping against a piling with a dull thud that echoed like a gavel. Footsteps splashed, 3 figures, dark-clad, fanning out with the efficiency of pros who'd mapped this maze before. One carried a duffel, likely packed with tools for sabotage, wire cutters for perimeter fences, jammers to counter their own, or worse, incendiaries echoing the Incheon fire. Mrs. Park's voice rose then, rasping over the water like a challenge. "Victor Kang, show yourself." The girl, Mia, steps forward first. Blood calls to blood, and debts demand witnesses. No fear in her tone, just the steel of old Korea, laced with the accent that bridged Busan docks and San Francisco shadows. A flashlight beam stabbed out from the boat, sweeping the pier in erratic arcs, catching glints off wet metal and the silver coil of her hair. Victor tensed, signaling Jax with a subtle hand chop. "Flank left, hold fire." "She's stalling," he murmured to Mia, the warmth of his proximity a stark contrast to the bay's bite. "Buying time for their play. Our decoys drawing heat topside, but down here, it's us against the tide." Mia nodded, prudence urging retreat through the tunnels, but curiosity and that nagging moral pull kept her rooted. The Lees wanted leverage, her as the Park heir, forcing Victor's hand on the Busan routes, rerouting manifests worth millions in shadowed cargo. Human greed, institutional blind spots at the port, guards bought off with burner cash, logs altered via insider hacks, making it all too real. The beam swung closer, illuminating Mrs. Park's face, eyes narrowed, lips pressed thin, but no signal to the intruders. One of the figures broke from the pack, advancing with a low crouch, boots squelching on the slick planks. "The scar confirms it," he called in accented English, voice muffled by a balaclava. "Hand her over, Kang." The old lady's promise ends tonight. Roots, or the girl burns like her kin. A bluff, perhaps, but the duffel's zipper rasped open, revealing the glint of a flare gun, its red tip promising a diversionary blaze to cover an extraction. Tension coiled tighter, the pier's environment turning lethal, waves surging higher with the incoming tide, threatening to swamp the planks and wash evidence or bodies into the bay. Victor's code warred visibly, strike hard or spare the innocent. His fingers brushed the pistol at his hip, but he held, eyes on Mrs. Park. "Talk," he demanded, stepping half into the light. Mia shadowed behind him. "If you're ally, call them off. If not, your bloodline ends here." The old woman rose slowly, Hanbeck whispering against the bench, her gnarled hands empty but commanding. "Fools! The Lees think to claim what's mine. My sister's lost daughter, the last Park thread, but I surfaced to bind the debt, not break it." She turned to the advancing figure, voice sharpening. "Stand down, nephew, or learn what clan fire truly means." Nephew. The word hung, a partial revelation slicing the fog. Mrs. Park's kin embedded in the rival fold, behavioral tells missed in Victor's scans, family grudges twisting into syndicate plays. The intruder faltered, beam dipping, but gunfire cracked from the boat. Suppressed pops that splintered a crate nearby, wood shards raining like accusations. Jax returned fire, precise bursts dropping one into the water with a splash, the bay swallowing the cry. Chaos erupted. The flare ignited, streaking skyward in a crimson arc that lit the pier in hellish glow, shadows leaping wild. Mia ducked as a bullet whined past, embedding in the manifest stack, the acrid scent of gunpowder mingling with salt spray. Victor shoved her toward the tunnel grate, the iron cold under her palms as she yanked it open, rusted hinges groaning. "Go!" he barked. Covering their retreat with controlled shots, non-lethal where possible, his code bending but unbroken. Mrs. Park bolted with surprising speed, joining them in the passage, her breath ragged. "The Lees bought my blood. Raoul's handler is their mole in your ranks. But the scar, it's proof. You're my niece, Mia. The fire spared you, hidden by allies. Victor's vow shields us now." Aye, the tunnel swallowed them. The flare's light fading to echoes, but the boat's motor roared back to life, pursuit thundering above. Jax's voice crackled over the earpiece. "They're circling for the east exit. Convoys rerouting, but the tide's flooding the lower chute. We need that access code from her, boss." Victor glanced at Mrs. Park, suspicion etched deep, loyalty tested by the night's fractures. Mia's world tilted, family found in peril, trust forged in the dark. But as water pooled ankle-deep, lapping at their legs, who among them held the true blade? The aunt emerging from shadows, or the code that demanded they all pay the price? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The tunnel's chill seeped through Mia's soaked shoes, the water rising steadily around their ankles like an insidious tide, carrying the murky scent of harbour silt and rusted iron. Dim emergency strips flickered overhead, casting wavering shadows that danced along the graffiti-scarred walls, where old shipping codes peeled from decades of damp. Victor led the way, pistol drawn low, his steps measured against the slosh that echoed like footsteps in pursuit. Mrs. Park clung to Mia's arm, her grip surprisingly firm for her age, the handbuck's silk heavy and clinging, whispering with each laboured breath. Jax brought up the rear, rifle slung ready, his earpiece crackling with fragmented updates from the convoy above, engines revving through the storm's remnants, tires churning over flooded streets. "Access code!" Victor demanded over his shoulder, voice cutting sharp through the drip of condensation from the ceiling pipes. "The east chute's our out. Floodgates manual but locked. If your family, prove it now." Suspicion laced his words, a raw edge honed by Raoul's betrayal and the night's cascade of half-truths. His code demanded trust in vows, but prudence screamed caution. Mrs. Park's revelation could be the perfect veil for a deeper play. Her nephew on the boat, a staged fracture to draw them into the open. The old woman hesitated, her silver hair plastered to her forehead, eyes gleaming in the low light like polished jade. "The code is inch and 47, she rasped, the numbers tumbling out with the weight of buried ledgers. "From the fire. My sister's last manifest, the one your father ignored. It unlocks the old smuggling panels." Mia's pulse thrummed, the scar on her jaw a burning line as fragments aligned. Foster files mentioning a warehouse code, redacted but persistent, now surfacing in this fetid vein beneath the wharf. Bloodline or bait? Autonomy clashed within her. Reject the claim and flee alone. Or lean into the found family that Victor's world promised, possessive yet protective. His glances back, a tether she hadn't asked for, but couldn't ignore. Jax punched the code into a weathered keypad at the chute's junction, the panel beeping affirmatively before grinding open with a hydraulic whine that reverberated like a distant gunshot. Water surged in, ankle-deep turning to knee-high, the current tugging at their legs with insistent force. They plunged through, the chute a narrow artery of concrete and rebar, lit sporadically by grates overhead, where the convoy's headlights pierced the murk in fleeting bursts. The boat's motor roared closer, muffled by the earth but unrelenting, its wake sloshing through cracks in the foundation. Pursuit organized. Leveraging port maps bought from corrupt harbor masters, institutional limits turning the bay into a trap. "They're flanking the east gate," Jax reported, water splashing as he checked his rifle's action, the metallic click swallowed by the tunnel's echo. Convoys jammed, deliberate roadblock on Embarcadero, semis rerouted via falsified manifests. Lee's doing, they've got insiders at dispatch. Victor cursed under his breath, the sound low and gravelly, his free hand steadying Mrs. Park as she stumbled over a submerged grate. Human conflict boiled, loyalty to his code versus the fear of exposure, a past loss, his brother's ambush in a similar flooded escape, mirroring this peril, restraining his urge to turn and fight. Mia's mind raced, piecing clues amid the chaos. The nephew's hesitation on the pier, familial tell, not syndicate steel, suggested Mrs. Park's words held truth, the Lees exploiting clan rifts for leverage. "The duffel," she said, voice steady despite the chill gnawing her bones. "Flare gun, but what else? If they're after manifests, it's not just me. Your shipping logs, Victor. Cross-reference the Incheon code with Raoul's proxies." Her observation cut through. Waitress instinct spotting inconsistencies like off-kilter orders, independence pushing her to contribute, not cower. Victor nodded, pulling a waterproof burner from his jacket, its screen fogging briefly as he tapped in a secure query to the loft's server. Results flickered. A hit, dozens of containers tagged Incheon 47 in the last year, weights off by kilos, rerouted to Lee-held warehouses in Oakland. Subtle betrayal, human error in guard rotations allowing the skim. "She's clean," he muttered, pocketing the device. The code matches archived files, Park's old vow ledger, digitized post-fire. But the nephew, he's the turncoat feeding them our tales. Mrs. Park's laugh was a wet rasp, echoing off the walls as they waded faster. The water now thigh-high, carrying debris that bumped like hidden threats. My sister's son. Greed poisoned him after the States. He thought to claim the debt for himself, using the scar as proof to force Victor's roots. But blood runs deeper. I came to reclaim you, Mia, before they twist it. Her eyes met Mia's in the gloom, sorrow etching lines deeper than the flood. The fire took your mother, hid you in the chaos, foster shadows, no ties. But your Park, vow or no, he shields us. The chute narrowed, forcing them single file, the air growing thicker with the tang of brine and engine oil seeping from above. Victor took point, shouldering through a rusted hatch that groaned open to a storm drain outlet overlooking the bay's edge. Waves crashing mere feet away, foam flecked with sodium light from the wharf. But as they emerged, gasping into the relative openness, headlights swept the gravel lot. Not the convoy, but a black van screeching to a halt, doors sliding open to spill three figures, Lee enforcers, faces masked, pistols glinting wet. "Down!" Victor shoved Mia behind a concrete barrier, the crack of gunfire splintering the night, bullets ricocheting off rebar with metallic pings. Jax returned fire, dropping one with a precise leg shot. Code intact, no kills where avoidable, but the others advanced, using the van as cover, their burner radios silent thanks to the jammer, but coordinated via preset signals. The environment turned savage, a sudden gust from the bay, whipped rain horizontal, blurring sightlines, while the tide's surge flooded the drain further, threatening to pull them back under. Mrs. Park pressed against the barrier, fumbling a small pendant from her hanbok, a jade heirloom etched with the Park crest, matching Mia's scar in jagged lines. "Take it," she urged, thrusting it into Mia's hand, the stone cool and heavy. "Proof for the ledgers, your mother's." Victor's father swore protection. He honors it now. Mia clutched it, the weight symbolic, legacy not in wealth, but in the transformation from stranger to kin, loyalty forged in this deluge. Victor flanked left, pistol barking twice, suppressed pops that felled a tire on the van, the vehicle listing with a hiss. "Convoy's breaking through, 2 minutes," he shouted over the fray, but a stray shot grazed his shoulder, blood blooming dark on his jacket. No graphic spray, just the seep of red mixing with rain, his wince betraying the cost. Mia's heart seized, possessiveness mirroring his, autonomy yielding to the bond tested here, ethics demanding she act. She scanned the chaos, spotting a behavioral tell, the lead enforcer's limp from an old wound, favoring his right, exposing his flank. "There, flank him," she called to Jax, who moved swift, tackling the man into the gravel with a thud. The third bolted for the van, but Victor's warning shot shattered the windshield, glass cascading like ice. As sirens wailed distant, port security alerted by the convoy's breach, the remaining threat scattered into the fog. Panting, Victor slumped beside her, pressing a makeshift bandage from his cuff to the wound, the coppery scent sharp amid the salt. Mrs. Park knelt, binding it tighter with hanbok silk, her hands steady. "The debt's paid in blood tonight," she murmured. "But the Lees won't stop. Raoul's network runs deeper, codes embedded in your manifests." Mia nodded, the pendant warm in her fist, trust solidifying amid the pull of family found. Yet as the convoy's lights crested the rise, engines roaring triumph, a final burner buzzed in Victor's pocket, an anonymous tip, coordinates to a hidden ledger in the Oakland yards. Was it Mrs. Park's nephew turning again, or a deeper mole waiting to strike? The convoy's engines thundered into the gravel lot like a cavalry charge, headlights slicing through the lingering fog and rain-slicked shadows of the wharf. Tires crunched to a halt, doors flying open as Victor's team spilled out, 6 men in dark tactical gear, rifles at the ready, fanning into a protective perimeter with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed drill. The bay's waves crashed louder now, a rhythmic roar underscoring the chaos, carrying the sharp tang of salt and spilled oil from the crippled van. Mia crouched behind the concrete barrier, her fingers still clenched around the jade pendant, its edges digging into her palm like a vow etched in stone. Victor leaned against her, his breath ragged, the makeshift bandage on his shoulder darkening with fresh blood that mingled with the drizzle. "Secure the sight," Victor barked into his earpiece, voice strained but commanding, the pain etching lines around his obsidian eyes. Jax moved swift, zip-tying the downed enforcer while others swept the shadows, their boots splashing through puddles that reflected the sodium glow from the distant pier. Mrs. Park knelt beside them, her hanbok torn and muddied, tearing another strip of silk to reinforce the binding. "Hold still, boy," she murmured, her gnarled hands deft despite the tremor of age and adrenaline. "You've honored the debt better than your father ever did." Her eyes flicked to Mia, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Blood recognized, but family forged in the fire of this night. Medics from the convoy swarmed, one kneeling to assess Victor's wound. A shallow graze, no arterial hit, but enough to demand stitches and a sling. No graphic sutures here. Just the sting of antiseptic wipes and the low hum of a portable scanner, confirming no fragments. Mia's heart twisted, possessiveness flaring at the sight. Her autonomy had bent tonight, yielding to this web of codes and kin, but the cost sharpened her resolve. "The tip," she said, nodding to the burner in Victor's pocket. "Oakland Yards. If Raoul's network runs deep, that's the ledger we burn." Victor nodded, wincing as the medic worked, his free hand brushing hers briefly, a touch of trust, not claim. "We end it there. Jax, prep the lead vehicle. Mrs. Park, you ride with us. Your code opens the last doors." The old woman rose, dignity unbroken, and they loaded in. The SUV's interior a cocoon of leather and low-lit consoles, the engine purring to life as it peeled away from the wharf. Behind them, the team handled cleanup. Enforcers detained for port security, the van towed under falsified manifests, institutional blind spots greased with Victor's quiet influence. The threat was real, organized through layers of human greed. Bought guards, hacked files, clan rifts exploited like cracks in a dam. The drive to Oakland blurred into a tense vigil, the bay's lights fading as they crossed the bridge, rain pattering against the tinted windows like impatient fingers. Victor's burner yielded coordinates. A derelict warehouse on the yard's edge. Its shipping manifests a digital graveyard of discrepancies. Incheon 47 crates rerouted, weights fudged by insiders who'd sold out for syndicate scraps. Mrs. Park sat across from Mia, her voice a steady rasp over the hum of tires on wet asphalt. "The nephew, my blood, twisted by loss. The fire took his mother too. He blamed your uncle's line, Victor's father, for the collapse. Joined the Lees to reclaim what he saw as stolen roots. But the scar... It called me from Seoul. I hacked the Foster archives myself weeks ago to confirm. Not to trap, but to protect." Mia's throat tightened, the pendant now tucked into her blouse, warm against her skin. Ethics warred within, independence cherished, yet this found family pulled like gravity, loyalty outweighing suspicion. Victor's code mirrored it, restraint in the face of betrayal, a past loss, his brother's death in a similar yard ambush, shaping choices that spared the innocent, even as it cost him blood tonight. "And the deeper mole?" Mia asked, glancing at him. His shoulder was immobilized, but his gaze held steady, possessive in its quiet promise. "Manifests point to dispatch lead, Carlson at the port, Raoul's handler feeding cords for a cut of the skim." Victor's voice gravelled, the SUV weaving through industrial sprawl toward the yards, where cranes loomed like skeletal guardians under floodlights. They arrived under cover of pre-dawn gloom, the team deploying silent. Thermal sweeps confirming 3 heat signatures inside, guards rotating with sloppy tells. Cigarette glows in the dark, phones unchecked. No storm now, just the distant clank of rail cars and the oily scent of idling locomotives. The environment a labyrinth of stacked containers and chain-link fences humming with low-voltage wire. They breached quiet, Jax picking the side door with a suppressed click, the air inside thick with dust and the musty reek of forgotten cargo. Ledgers glowed on a makeshift desk, discrete files on laptops, printed manifests spilling secrets. Busan routes hijacked, Parkblood leveraged as the final pawn. Carlson spun at their entry, face paling under the beam of a tactical light, his accomplices, 2 low-level Lees, freezing mid-handoff of a burner drive. "Kang," he stammered, hands rising slow. "It's just business." Victor's team secured them swift, no shots fired, zip ties and hoods, the code holding firm. Mrs. Park stepped forward, Her presence a thunderclap in the dim space, snatching a ledger that confirmed it all. The nephew's orchestration, Raoul's bribes, the scar's exposure bought from digital black markets. "End the line here," she said, voice steel. "The vows fulfilled. No more innocence in the flames." Mia watched, the weight lifting, as Victor oversaw the data wipe. Servers fried with a targeted EMP pulse. Common tech scrambling, drives without trace. Victory came costly. Victor's injury a reminder of exposure. Networks cracked open for rivals to eye, but the sacrifice sealed the debt. As dawn broke grey over the yards, painting the containers in muted gold, they emerged into the open air. The team loading the captives for discreet handover to authorities. Anonymous tips ensuring institutional gears turned without Victor's name. Mrs. Park turned to Mia, eyes soft for the first time. "Bloodline's just the start, child. Family's what we build from the scars." She embraced her briefly, the hanbok silk cool, then nodded to Victor. "Guard her well. The code binds you now." In the SUV's warmth, heading back to the city, Victor's hand found Mia's, not gripping but holding, a pledge born of the Knight's Forge. The true treasure wasn't the reclaimed roots or shattered syndicates, but this, protection woven from trust, a found family outlasting the shadows. His shoulder ached, a badge of restraint, her scar, once a hidden mark, now a symbol of transformation. Loyalty and memory would endure, raw power paling against the quiet strength they'd claimed. Weeks later, in the quiet of Victor's Presidio loft, overlooking a bay now calm under summer sun, Mia traced the healed line on his shoulder, the pendant on a chain around her neck. Mrs. Park had returned to her handbook tailoring shop in Chinatown, a neutral anchor, weaving threads of legacy without chains. No grand spoils, just chosen paths. Mia's shifts at Lotus Garden lighter, Victor's ledgers cleaner, their bond a subtle code of its own. Ambition tempered by prudence, suspicion yielding to the family they'd defended. But in the undercurrents of the Bay Area, whispers lingered. A new rival, scanning old manifests, a faint ping on a forgotten burner. Would the vows hold? Or would the shadows call again? Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.